It is a great honor for me to be joined by the greatest professional wrestler of all time, the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be, Bret the Hitman Hart. Bret, thank you very much for accepting this interview.
I'm sure it's going to be a fun little interview. It's not very often I get to do an interview with Harry together.
Yeah. And of course, we are being joined by the son of the legendary Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog. Harry, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure, Hassan. Thank you very much for having us on. And like I said, it's a rare occasion when I can do an interview with Bret, and looking forward to it.
Let's get into it. Bret, we are going to run the Greatest Bret Hart match tournament. I have prepared 16 matches. We are going to run the bracket for you. You will choose which match is going to go to the second round. Harry will give your thoughts on some of the matches.
Okay, awesome.
Let's get right into it. Bret, so the first round match, we have Hart Foundation versus the British Bulldog versus Bret Hart versus Davey Boy Smith from SummerSlam 1992. Before having your pick, Bret, I just need to ask you, you always say Dynamite Kid is the greatest in-ring performer of all time. Just let us know, why do you have him in such high regard?
When he was in his prime, I think that it's fair to say that I learned a lot from him. You know, he was pretty remarkable for his time period, you know, and I think a lot of that's sort of been lost over the ages a little bit because you don't have that much footage. Really, you don't have that much footage of Dynamite to go by, which is a real shame because initially there was a lot of footage of him. I think going back to my, you know, tagging up with Jim and the Hart Foundation wrestling against the Bulldogs, for example, you know, both probably myself for sure, and I think Davey Boy would be the same. We worked with and against Dynamite a lot of times in the Stampede wrestling days, and I think that I know for in Davey's case that Dynamite taught him a lot, like really gave him a whirlwind sort of education on how to and Davey came right up to pretty close to Dynamite's level too. And I think unfortunately most of the matches that I've got left from those days, it's hard to really get a feel for you know, the matches I had with Dynamite in my solo career. But we really had remarkable matches. I had somebody ask me what my greatest match was ever a few days ago. And I was thinking about it, and I said probably the greatest match I ever had that is not on tape, that I can't watch back and can only kind of go by memory, is I wrestled Dynamite Kid in a ladder match in Regina, Saskatchewan, that I think was as good a match as I ever had in anything I ever did in WWF or WCW. Or it was such a remarkable match. I try to write about it in my book, but again, it's not there to review. I do have a couple of still pictures from that time period, or from that match specifically, but it was just such a great match. And I remember, you know, winning the match at the end of it. And I know that I won a lot of titles and a lot of big matches in my career, but I don't know if anything quite captured that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think going back to your question with the Bulldogs and the Hart Foundation, we really, and again, it's not, you know, the best matches that the Hart Foundation and the Bulldogs had, they're not on, they didn't record them. There's a lot of matches when we first started.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's quite a few matches. Even the very first one we ever had with the Bulldogs in Philadelphia at the Spectrum was one of the, it's out there. And a lot of the matches we had in the Garden and a couple of the, you know, but it's all the very early days that we were still perfecting our matches. And I think the best stuff came a few months later, like when they weren't recording the matches. And
you guys had a lot of really good cage matches together too, right?
Yeah, that are never were never recorded.
Yeah, that's a shame.
It's a shame that they didn't record. You know, the same thing happened with my brother Owen. Also, me and Owen wrestled at WrestleMania 10, and we had this, very good, one of my greatest matches, really, at WrestleMania 10. But yeah, that was the first time we ever really wrestled. Then we went on the Heart Attack tour over to Europe, and then I think that same tour went all through the United States after that.
Yeah.
Those were better matches than WrestleMania 10, but they never recorded any of them. And I'd say even when Owen and I, by the time we got to SummerSlam, which is like almost 6 months later, we'd already had such great matches leading into that were never recorded, never taped. And again, that's like where people always say, "Oh, I love the match at the WrestleMania 10." I go, "Well, you would have loved the matches we had like 6 weeks later. They were even better, or 2 months later." Going back to your question about the Bulldogs and the Hart Foundation, I know that when we started wrestling each other, I remember like the whole dressing room would come down to watch the match, or they would be by the curtain, or they would be at the bottom of the ramp. Yeah, all watching. Every wrestler would come out and watch, and I think that alone says it all. People couldn't believe the pace we set, and they couldn't believe the realism. And like when Dynamite clotheslined you, he clotheslined you. It was like always you had to be. They were very physical matches. And we were all in our prime, and we were all digging hard to keep our job, like to earn the Hart Foundation. We were, trying really hard to make a name for ourselves. We were not. I remember them saying, "You guys are not written into anything. Like they have no plans for us other than we'll put you with the Bulldogs and see what happens." And so we were fighting for our jobs and trying our best to shine or make a name for ourselves. And the Bulldogs, they were getting the big push. They were going to be big stars. I think they knew that right off the bat. Mm-hmm. But me and Jim were not written in that way. But working with them and the back and forth kind of matches that we had, it changed everything. Like we got written in, and they started making plans for us. I remember it was George Scott that said to me about 3 or 4 months after, he goes, "We don't know what to do with you guys now because we never expect you to be so good. Now we got to figure out what to do with you." That was kind of how it was. I remember Dynamite used to joke about me and Jim being the Push brothers. That if they worked with us, they'd give us a push down the road, and that turned out to be very true when we won the titles from the Bulldogs. That we finally got that push.
Brett, what would you be your choice to advance? Is it the tag match or the SummerSlam 92 match to the second round?
I would say the SummerSlam 92. I put it up with my greatest matches for sure. Everything we did with the Bulldogs and the Hart Foundation, we had some great matches, especially some great cage matches. But I don't know that I put anything past Wembley.
Oh, yeah, that was great. Yeah.
Wembley was a very special performance, especially with the crowd. Yep. One thing to have a great match, it's another thing to have a great match in front of 82,000 people. When I watch back the Wembley match, I always go, that's such a beautiful match. And I don't know how you couldn't see it any other way.
Yeah.
Harry, were you live at the SummerSlam 92 match or you watched it on TV? Were you at the stadium?
No, I was there live. Actually, my family and I, we were sitting up in the, I guess they call it like the Queen's Court. Like it's like all the way at the very top of the stadium. So just the atmosphere and the ambience, it was really, really amazing. I remember weird things about that weekend. Like I remember somebody had stolen Shawn Michaels' new gear. He had just gotten a bunch of new tights and stuff made. And I don't know if it was a rib or whatever, but I remember Davey was going, "Oh, Shawn, he's fucking hot about that, blah, blah, blah." And he had kind of a lackluster match with Rick Martel that night. But aside from that, I remember it was, the whole country of England was celebrating for like a whole week after Davey won. And Bret had a huge fan following over there in the UK too. So it was kind of like a babyface versus babyface match, but I don't know if you could ever duplicate anything that great.
I remember when we stayed at the hotel the night before the match, that there was maybe 1,000 people outside at the bottom of the hotel. You might remember this too, Harry, but they were chanting Bulldog, and they were chanting his name like a cheer, like a soccer chant, and then they'd cheer for Bulldog for about 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden another chorus would start up with hit man, and they go back and forth all night to the point that I couldn't sleep. It was so loud, and it never stopped. And I remember even in the morning it was still going. There was chanting, and there was a lot of excitement and electricity in the air before we ever got to the building that day.
Oh yeah, and Brett would probably remember too. The arena was so huge; it was like a 30-minute trek to go from like the locker room all the way to the ring, right? Because I think the locker room was like all the way on the other side.
Yeah, it was a long haul to the ring. In fact, I think I played my music twice.
Yeah,
right. I remember that.
Thankfully, it wasn't raining that day, so because it was outdoors.
Our next matchup, it is the Bret Hart versus Mr. Perfect from SummerSlam 1991. Of course, one of the greatest intercontinental matches of all time. And going against Bret Hart versus Hakushi from In Your House. Bret, I really love the Hakushi match. So before making your pick, just a quick thoughts on the Hakushi match first.
Well, the Hakushi match, I had two great matches with Hakushi. I had one really good match at the In Your House. Is that the one we're talking about?
Right, the In Your House match.
And then I had maybe an even better match with him a few weeks later, a month later, or 2 months later on Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
great matches.
It's hard to say which one was better of the two. They were very similar matches. Hakushi was a very unique talent. I'd like to have seen Shawn Michaels or Triple H have the same match with Hakushi that I did. Maybe Shawn could have pulled it off, but.
Right.
But I think that there's something very unique about his style and what he wasn't the biggest guy.
Yeah.
He didn't have an arsenal of moves, but he did have a few very special moves that could really blow your mind when you watched him. And he was always game for doing it. You know, like he was never afraid to do a back somersault off the top rope, over the top rope, or he did some amazing stuff.
Yeah.
He was a very nice guy. And a hard worker. I love the match that I had with him. I thought for a first, again, it's the same thing that when you wrestle somebody the first time, especially in a pay-per-view, it doesn't always come together the way you want it to.
Yeah.
But I thought, all things considered, for a guy that, there's a bit of a language barrier there. He wasn't really a great heel. You know what I mean? He was more of a great wrestler, but he did a lot of moves and stuff that, you don't necessarily get you heat. Like I think that was the thing that I had to kind of remind him and tell him is like, you gotta kind of be more of a bad guy, rake my eyes and cheat a little bit. Otherwise you're not gonna. And he was, by nature, was a nice guy and he was not the kind of wrestler that took a lot of liberties in there. He was very respectful that I was the superstar legend kind of thing, and he's gonna do whatever I tell him to do, and which I liked about him. But we had a great match. I know Lawler interfered, I think, in that match, if I'm not mistaken. It cost me maybe I'm remembering it wrong, but I think that's what happened.
Yeah, I thought that Hakushi, he had a certain like smoothness to him, like almost like Ricky Steamboat, where it would be. He was a good worker, but I don't know, like you were saying, like for him to be a heel to get actual heat was maybe difficult for him. But he had like a steadiness to his work where he was very, you know what I'm saying? Very steady and very smooth.
He had, I think, his manager to play that part where he would cheat and.
When I wrestled him, they kind of tried to build him up. They didn't really do the greatest job of building him up, I guess a little bit. I'm not sure when he carried the head. Did he have the head by then?
Right.
They did little things that were, depending on how you like your wrestling. I mean, there's a lot of things you go, that was pretty hokey. Like he had a rubber mask with my head, and
right.
At the same time, maybe that helped. I know that probably one of my concerns going into that match with Hakushi was that, is he capable of being that sort of evil bad guy that they were trying to make him turn into. And it was, like I say, it's one of those questionable things whether you whether you bought into that or whether you didn't, whether you loved the match or not. You know, like if you bought into him being the heel that he was. The one thing I will say about that match was that sometimes, you know, there's a certain way to tell stories in matches, and that match was the pace had a very nice, easy pace and a comfortable pace.
Right.
And I think if you watch that match closely, you'll see a couple of times where Hakushi gets lost in the ring and forgets what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And I always calm him back down and control the match again and kind of make him remember, like, oh yeah, so this is where we were. Get back on track. Right. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of times when you go off track and you forget something, it bothers you for the whole match, and it messes up your thinking for the rest of the moves. And it's kind of my attitude was always, nobody knows you've screwed up the spot except for me and you. Yeah. So just calm down, and we'll go right back into another headlock, and then we'll do it again in a minute. We'll wait a few seconds, and we'll try it again. Yeah. Or I'd cut to the net, you know, and I would go into it and take him right back to where he needed to go, and then he would get back on track again. Right. And Steve Austin was another guy that was like that. If he forgot something or something went wrong or he screwed up a spot, the whole match could go south after
completely that. Sideways, yeah.
He would be so mad at himself for not remembering what it was that he'd forget everything else that he had to do. Right. Yeah. And you had to kind of stop him right in the middle of the match and take over and kind of set him right back to square one again where we were. Say, now, okay, just do it again. Like, relax, calm down. Steve, I think that's the one thing I taught Steve Austin was to calm down and don't get so racy. Mm-hmm. It's not a speed race. We're telling a long story. There's no reason to panic. And I think I taught him in the early days that I worked with Steve Austin, he panicked a lot. He'd just panic, and then he'd be like out of control after that, where you just go, what happened? You know, and it's like,
like a deer in headlights kind of.
Yeah, he'd just start to panic and do all kinds of stuff, like moves that weren't, you know, he'd just panic and do whatever came into his head and forget he wasn't used to, like me, I laid out a whole match of this comes and then this happens, and then when this happens, and then this happens and that happens, and it's like it was all spaced out, and it was an easy kind of space, not too complicated. But if you trip up anywhere, and it's like you just etch a sketch. Everything you planned out is forgot. Doesn't even know how to go back and fix it. Right. And I taught him to calm down, watch this is how you fix it. You just go back to square one. Yeah. And calm down, and within about 10 or 15 seconds, you start to remember everything that was coming up. And so, same with Hakushi, it was the same way. And if you watch that match back, you see a couple of times where he forgets everything. And
yeah, I remember. Yeah.
He starts to panic, but nobody knows but him and me. And I would calm him back down and get right back to the story. And it flows very nicely, and that's what I liked about Hakushi. He was a good listener, and he put a lot of trust in me, and we had good matches. But going back to your question, I don't know that those matches or that match can compare to the Mr. Perfect. Mr. Perfect and I, kind of the opposite of what I said a few minutes ago. You know, I always think, we had our best matches later on. The truth about Mr. Perfect and me, we had our best matches before the SummerSlam. You know, all through like 1980, maybe 1981. Maybe I'm going back too far. It was probably 87, 88 that I first worked with Kurt Hennig. I was still in tags with Jim, but for some reason, when Kurt first came in, they stuck me with Kurt and stuck us in a bunch of matches for a long period of time. Like I was always kind of strange to me, like why they would take me out of tags, but I didn't really mind. I think we were wrestling the Rougeau brothers or something like that around those times. Kurt Hennig and I had some incredible matches and great timing. And Kurt was the kind of guy that you could wake up at 4 a.m. and somebody say, look, you guys are on. You need to go out and wrestle right now. We need 20 minutes. Or we need 60 minutes. It really didn't matter. They could have woke us both up at 4 a.m. and said, you got 15 minutes to get ready for your match. You're on next, kind of thing. And it's like, we could walk out there and do a great match without talking to each other, without communicating, and just tie up and start doing the match. And he was one of the most perfect guys to work with. I mean, Mr. Perfect was very fitting for him. He was so safe, so reliable, and just a joy to work with. He was really one of the most professional guys. Like, if he was going to jump off the top rope with a knee drop, you never had to worry about where he was going to land or how he was going to land. He was one of the safest, most reliable guys you could ever work with. And we had so many great matches before the SummerSlam. And then that summer, before the SummerSlam, is when we found out we were wrestling at SummerSlam. And he was hurt with his back. And
I remember you always said that his back was really screwed then, huh?
He had to take time off, and they didn't know if he was even going to work with me. But he insisted. He said, I will be there. The way he put it to me, Bret Hart made me, helped me when I needed to get over. I got him over so that he could work with Hogan and Warrior and all the guys that he worked with. And then he became champion. And it was sort of his way to do right by me after. Like, then it's like all of a sudden it's like, yeah, we're going to throw you with Bret Hart at SummerSlam cold. He's going to take 2 months off to rest his back. He came in that day, cold, like he hadn't wrestled in 2 months. His conditioning wasn't quite what it was when we were in our prime. And I hadn't worked with Kurt for, a year or so, or 6 months. It wasn't like we'd worked before that and had these great matches. But that SummerSlam match, what I loved about it was that, he certainly tried his best, and he gave me his best, and we had a great match, and I love it for the match it was. And, there's things that we did in that match that didn't really come off so well, and just a sort of a lesson to young wrestlers today. So we had some idea where we both climbed up from the outside of the ring, we both climbed up the turnbuckles.
Right.
And both ended up on the top turnbuckle at the same time. And I can't remember what we were going to do. It might have been a suplex off the top. But the way it worked out, it was kind of a bit clumsy. But it still worked. And I think we fell in the ring together, like fell down into the back inside the ring. A, it looked real, because it kind of was real.
Yeah.
And B, it's always like, at least we tried. I came up with an idea. Sometimes they don't work. Sometimes they do. It never hurts if as long as you keep it real.
Right.
Yeah. The point that you try, especially on a pay-per-view, to do something a little different that nobody's seen before. And I always loved that match. Just little things like that we experimented. We had the guts to at least try a few different things instead of just doing the same old things. And I know that on the finish, it was something we never did before, like the leg drop and then me.
Yeah, you caught him right.
I remember when we did that, and I won the title. There was sort of a belief at the time that, like, I remember all the wrestlers watched it in the dressing room. They said that Joey Morello, I think it was Joey Morello, rang the bell too soon. Maybe it was Earl Hebner. I can't remember which one refereed.
It was Hebner, right? It was Hebner.
That he rang the bell too soon. That he ring the bell, and that I only had him in the sharpshooter for about like 2 seconds. I came back to the dressing room thinking I thought it was a great match. Like, I thought we hit it out of the park, and it was like a home run. And I remember I think Hulk Hogan said, too bad about the finish. Like, it was like they all kind of made out like that we dropped the referee screwed up the ending.
When I was watching that, Brett, I thought that was done intentionally because Kurt's back was so bad that he couldn't be put in the sharpshooter. That's why I thought the bell was rang so soon. I didn't know it was just intentional.
It might have been, but I remember it was kind of the way it was played out to me, because of course when you come back, I didn't see it. I just did it. I remember it's like everyone's like had these. Oh, it was so good, everything but the finish.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, like I got kind of bummed out about it. Then I remember watching it, I think the next day because the next day you can watch it. We probably did the TV tapings the next day. But I remember watching it back and going, there was nothing wrong with the ending. Like, it was a little rushed, but nothing.
Right.
You can't listen to everybody when they come. Like, everybody's a critic.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and the criticism that it wasn't as good as it could have been, I thought was a little overstated. It was a fine match and a fine ending.
Yeah, the finish was fine.
He gave me 100%. I know Kurt did have problems with his back. The whole idea of Kurt having his outfit ripped off was his idea, and I think he did that as a tribute to me. Like he wanted to. Kurt couldn't have tried harder for me and given more to me, and you know, just showing up that day and then me winning the title was a huge moment for me. And I would put that match over the one with Hakushi.
Great. So our next matchup, I think this should be easy, Bret. It's Bret versus Steve Austin from WrestleMania 13 against Bret Hart versus Ricky Steamboat. My question, Bret, speaking of the Steve Austin, of course, the match is an instant classic, but like your promos leading and your character work leading to such match, the sense of realism in your promos is always unmatched, and your delivery, it always had a sports feel to it. Was it all yours vision, or did Vince like had points for you, like he wanted you to play such a role in the promo?
No, it's all comes right from that's how I best operate, is I try my hardest to, in my mind, imagine and create a sort of a feel for realism. Like, what would I really say in this situation? I'm not sure. I can't. You know, it's funny that you say my promos leading into that match, because I don't remember any of them. I know I had my the next night after the WrestleMania 13. Right. I wrestled in Rockford, Illinois, I think it was, and that's where I did that 22-minute speech about right. the USA can kiss my ass and all that right. kind of stuff. So I know that was, I think, one of my greatest promos ever. So I know I was in a good promo kind of mindset. But I think that was...
you had that promo where you shoved Vince down before the match and you went off on TV. That was before the match.
Are you sure?
Was it before?
And the steel cage against Sid, where I think you shoved Vince down and you went off on TV.
I remember it being after.
I thought it was after, too. But
really, I think it was before, because you had Taker interfering in the match because he wanted Sid to win so he can face him, but Austin was trying to help you to win the match, so your match would have been the title match.
Well, I'd have to check because I don't know, right. But I know that even that match where I swore and that was all their fault.
Right.
That was. People always go, oh, Bret Hart went off the rails, and he started swearing, and the truth is they came in and they said we're going to cut the microphone, and the only microphone that's going to be on, it won't be able to hear anything you're saying on TV, but it'll be the house mic. You're going to cut it on the house mic with right. So the crowd hears it.
Right.
It's not and say whatever you want. I remember going, like, swear. I said, the way it was set up, I'm like supposed to be pretty mad. They're like, you say whatever you want, because it's all off TV. They said, we'll bleep it anyway. Well, they forgot. They forgot to bleep it. And they forgot to cut the mic, and I'm swearing on TV, and I got no idea. That's a technical thing. I'm truly lucky that I said the swear words that I said, rather than throwing F-bombs and way more stronger swear words, because I'm thinking it didn't matter. But I also know there's kids in the house show audience, and so I'm trying not to use words that are going to be overly strong, like F-bombs and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I remember they came back and they're going, what are you doing? You can't swear like that on TV. And I'm going, you guys told me to do that. And I remember they stopped and went like, oh, yeah, we did. And then it was like, you never hear that part. You always hear about me going off the rails, but they don't ever tell
the delivery is amazing. I thought your delivery in that segment is absolutely amazing.
I always loved the match with Steve, mostly because there was a lot of frustration, real frustration. And the way my character was being screwed every week, like Austin screwing me at the Rumble, and Sean really did throw a monkey wrench into everything, like when he retired to go find his smile and all that stuff.
Right.
It was fully my understanding from the day that I joined WWF, like when I came back and I fought Steve at Survivor Series. I believe that I was fighting Sean for the title at WrestleMania 13 in the main event. And then Sean suddenly has the bad knee, and he's, retires and forfeits the title, which is funny how it was okay for Sean to forfeit the title, but it came time for me when I left the company to forfeit the title. Like, that's a no-no, or, it's like they had different rules for different people. In my mindset, it's like, yeah, they are kind of pulling my tail a lot and kind of pissing me off. And I'm trying not to really make a big deal of it, because the main event spot went to Undertaker and Psycho Sid now for the main event.
Mm-hmm.
And the main event money. Like, they got the big payday that day. My payday with Steve Austin was nothing special. When we showed up that day for WrestleMania 13, I remember Steve was like, he didn't have any ideas. He even goes, I'm not a submission guy. And a submission match just makes things that much harder. Like, it's not like submission matches are that much better. You got to know a lot of submissions, or at least you got to have some that mean something. I remember saying to Steve, it's like, what do we got here for submissions? And I remember, what do you got? And he said he had that tree stump puller move where he puts his leg behind your neck. It's kind of a shoot move that he had where he put it on me. That was the only submission hold Steve told me, because that's the only one I know. And I barely know that. I just had someone show me in the dressing room how it works.
And Bret, if my memory serves me correct, wasn't your knee really bad going into that, where your match with Steve was meant to be kind of more brawling because you couldn't actually run at the time, I think, right?
No, I was better. I was okay by then.
Because I remember you took some time off of the King of the Ring, right? You got a scope or something done on your knee?
Yeah, after that. It all happened after.
Yeah, after that, okay.
Shortly after that. I actually happened in, I think, Bahrain. I was sidestepping Undertaker and I blew my knee out. It was like the simplest little thing. I was just shuffling to the side and I could feel it snap. And it just bothered me a little bit through the match. Yeah. And when I came home, I saw the doctor and he goes, yeah, you tore your cartilage. And we're going to have to do a scope surgery. And so all that happened. But I mean, that was all coming up. The match with Steve, we really didn't have much. Like, I remember, like, I got the figure 4 I can put on. I got the sharpshooter. I can put a Boston Crab on. There was a lot of limited kind of, maybe the cross-face chicken wing, or there wasn't that many submission holds to dig into. Yeah. And I remember sitting on the ring with Steve Austin and just being like, what are we going to do? And he's like, I don't know. We'd wrestled at Survivor Series and we did everything. We thought we did everything that we could do in that match. And that was a match that we did we didn't expect to really fight each other till maybe SummerSlam, or give us a long space before we wrestle again. But because of the Shawn thing, they threw us right back together. I don't think Steve was that excited about working with me at WrestleMania. And I was kind of like, we just did this. Like, it's kind of, what are we going to do to top this match? And so then whenever we sat on the ringside, I sat on the apron and I said, just started describing what I thought the match should go like. I said, I see this match being like a school fight, and we talked about that. And I said, should be brawling. And, we just kind of started to piece the match together real quick. And there's some really great moments in that match and great psychology. And because I know he told me, Steve was the only guy that knew that I was going to turn heel the next night. And he said, I know that you and me are kind of basically going to switch positions over the next little while. And I know you're turning heel tomorrow. And Vince told me not to tell anybody. But like, yeah, so I'm going to be a heel and you're going to kind of eventually be a babyface. Steve had said to me, he goes, I don't want to turn heel over a babyface overnight. I want to wait like maybe 3, 4, 5 months and try to get as much out of being a heel as long as I can before I turn babyface, which was actually pretty smart thinking. I remember the match we just pieced together, I think was just one sort of idea after another. I think most of those ideas were mine, but I love the spot that we had where I go to get the bell and I take the bell and I set it on the apron, and then you could sort of see the way I acted it, like, oh, wait a minute, the bell's not going to be good enough. I'm going to go get a chair. Still, I grab a chair and I go, that chair's not good enough. Give me this one. I want a chair with no padding. I want a metal chair. And I grab a metal chair and I slide it in. But that in itself, that little where you distraction, where you forget about the bell, is really the key to the whole match. You take front turnbuckles and I remember you took the padding off. And I think front turnbuckle with no padding on the top. We did so many things to make you forget about the bell. Even the kick in the crotch that Steve Austin gave me it wasn't one of these Ric Flair things with the arm. It was like a football punt. Like, it was like a huge, it was a very, very carefully done move that I told Steve how to do it. The key to that was you got to stand pretty close to me. You got to actually kick me a little too far. So you end up kicking me in the butt, but it looks just, because you got to lay it in there. Yeah. And you got to pull your family jewels up a little higher so they don't get in the way. But it's a very risky thing to do, but I remember it worked perfectly. And I think the realism of the way I sold it, the way I fell down, and
Absolutely right.
this makes you go, oh, this thing's the real
Right.
deal. Like, these guys are killing each other. And
Speaking
even
of that selling, Brett, even the way you sold the steel chair shut when he hit you in your back, that was amazing as well.
Well, I can tell you it hurt every bit as much as it looked like it hurt.
Definitely.
But it's one of those things that's like one of Ric Flair's chops. It's like they hurt, and they only hurt for it's more of a slap thing.
Right.
It's the flat of the back, that slap sound, like it's like someone whipping you with a belt or something. It's like it hurts, but it only hurts for a few seconds. But
momentarily.
It was a necessary part of the match. I remember telling Steve like to lay it in. But I will say it hurt like hell. But I mean, luckily it wasn't the kind of thing that hurt the next day too much. There was a lot of that kind of stuff in the match that we did that was different, that makes that match stand out. And I did love how, remember, if you ever watch that match back, Steve throws me out of the ring on the wrong side of the ropes, on the opposite, like,
or the finish, right?
Throws me out. He doesn't throw me out where the bell is, which is where I got to be.
Yeah.
And if you watch that match back, how I delicately get back in the ring and fall down and trip my way and fall back out of where the belt is, or where the bell is on the apron, that saves the whole match. Because otherwise we'd be talking about how, geez, that match was all screwed up at the end. And I remember when Steve threw me through the ropes, he was like, oh shit, wrong side. And it's like, but it was too late. He already threw me through the ropes. He walked away like, oh my God, like I just screwed up the whole ending. But when he turns back around, I think he went out on the floor to go to the ringside. I can't remember what happened, but I know that by the time he really turns around, I'm in the right spot. Then he comes over. That's where he got the cord. I think he got the cord on the floor. It was a very realistic match, and I love that match I love it because I think most of that match is mine. I think Steve was,
Mm-hmm.
This is what we're doing, Steve. And I remember I kind of paced out the whole match with Steve.
Right.
But he trusted me and did everything that I told him to do. And it came off really well because he listened to me and understood. He could visually see the highs and lows and how it built. And I always say to people today that match with Steve Austin has everything in it that a UFC match doesn't. It's a great, intense match that you got to go when it's over. It's like, man, I think if you love wrestling, you got to love that match.
Right.
And what was the other match that you compared?
It was the Ricky Steamboat match, but obviously the Steve Austin match will advance.
Yeah, but I'll say this much about Ricky the Dragon. He was a beautiful, beautiful performer. He really did remind me a lot of Bruce Lee.
Yeah, that's right.
And he was a total pro in the ring. And he was old school. He's not like he wasn't like Shawn or Steve Austin or these other wrestlers that came from the next era. He's more the Ric Flair era, just a little bit, and even Dynamite era, like older, just a little bit older than me. But he liked to call it in the ring. He didn't like a big plan. He liked to listen to the crowd, play his ear to the
provides, yeah.
Listen to how the crowd's reacting. And if they need a spot that needs more action or a cutoff spot or needs me to take over or him to take over on me, you just do it because it's the best thing. He was very good at that kind of.
Was that the only time that you worked Ricky? Was in Boston? Or did you work him another time?
I worked 2 matches with him. I worked that night in Boston, I worked that day. Yeah, that was Boston.
Yeah,
and
Boston.
I worked with him the next day in the Washington Cap Center. But I would say the match I had in Washington in the Cap Center was the better match. Just we're a little tighter, a little more familiar with each other. I never worked with him.
Yeah.
There was one spot where we did some kind of reverse hip toss thing, and I just remember I wasn't prepared for it, and I hadn't done it with him before. A little off, but I remember we did it the next day, and it was like perfect. Yeah.
Gotcha. Also, weren't you supposed to work with Ricky at WrestleMania 2, and then they switched it to Hercules?
Yeah, and it turned out to be a blessing because I was supposed to work with Ricky Steamboat. They told me like a few weeks before, and that's what the match in Boston was a match for Ricky and me to get familiar with each other.
Yeah, feel each other out. Yeah,
feel each other out and kind of get a vibe for what our styles were like. And I couldn't have been more excited that day when I got to the building. I was like so excited to work with Ricky at WrestleMania. But in your mind, you're thinking, I'll wrestle Ricky at WrestleMania and we'll have a good 15, 20-minute match. And blow the roof off the building, and I'll finally show everybody that I can really, I could be a big player in the company. But I got there that day in Boston, and they said, they've scratched you and Ricky. It's not you. It's Ricky and Hercules now, and they're going to put you in the Battle Royal, which was a big step down. I was like, really? Like, I was so heartbroken. Ricky knew I was really down. Like, I was like, geez, that was my big chance, to show everybody that I could really deliver a match with Ricky. It turned out to be the best thing, because I think Hercules wrestled for 3 minutes or something like that, maybe even a minute.
It was
4 minutes. It was just a squash match. If they'd done that to me, it would have done nothing for me. It might have been a nail in the coffin for me, kind of thing. I was a better wrestler than that. I'm so glad that we didn't wrestle at WrestleMania, what actually happened was that they threw me in the match with the Battle Royal, and I remember going, there's nothing for me in the Battle Royal. I'm not a big guy. Battle Royals are just not they never have been my cup of tea.
Yeah, me neither.
But I did suggest to them, I think it was the next day, I talked to George Scott about it, who was the booker back then. I said, why don't you put me and Anvil in last with Andre? Because I know my dad, whenever he had wrestling shows, he'd always put Hito and Sakurada, his two Japanese guys that were his best guys. He'd always throw them in. They'd be the very last two guys with Andre. Because Andre liked those guys, and he trusted them. And that would make Andre happy. And me and Jim got along pretty good with Andre at that time period. And so I said, why don't you make Jim and me the last two guys with Andre, and have, Andre can pick me up over his head, throw me over the top rope, and Jim can catch me on the floor. Mm-hmm. And I remember they came up to me a few days later and said, Andre loved the finish. That's what Andre wants to do for the finish. And so I was like, great. At least we'll be the last ones in the Battle Royal with all the football players. It gave me a little hope that maybe they'd still do something with me. Back to Rick Steamboat again. He was such a pro in the ring. I was one of those kind of guys that was the new era, and there was the old school guys like Flair and Ricky Steamboat, Tito Santana, and Rick Martel. They're all a little older than me, and they're all guys that were legends, or like not legends, but top names in the business. Mm-hmm. And then I think Dynamite was on that cutting edge where it's like we started changing wrestling. Like we started adding more complicated and more complex high spots that would a lot of running and leaping, and Dynamite maybe we're doing press slams on guys and jumping on. It did so many. We took it up a notch, and a lot of the wrestlers, the bigger names, didn't need to take it up that notch yet. They still kind of call it out there, and let's we don't need to. We can sit in a headlock for a longer stretch of time. Whereas the Bulldogs, Dynamite and Davey, and even the guys from Calgary were more complicated and we did more
amazing,
stepped it up a little bit more than those guys. Yeah. Sometimes when you got in the ring with a guy like Ric Flair, it's like he's used to driving a little bit slower. He doesn't want to go that fast, and he doesn't. Rick was one of those guys, and probably Rick Steamboat too, were guys that didn't want to complicate. We don't need to do all that. We can get the same thing done by not doing all that, so we can go a little less. And there's nothing really wrong with that. It's just the way that was the style leading into. Yeah. I think that's where you go. That's where actually Dynamite Kid, I think, changed the business. Like it stepped up a little bit. Like we were driving the car a lot faster. And so that's where you get this sort of contrast of errors. I always go, there's always been a lot of criticism that I've, had for Ric Flair for a long period of time. When you think about it, it's not really that Rick wasn't very good or less that he was, or it was just that Rick wrestled that style. He didn't cater to the new guy's style because that's just how they are. Harley Race was the same thing. You could never tell Harley Race how to wrestle, and same with, Ricky Steamboat. We kind of went in there with no script.
Yeah, I see.
There's a certain beauty to the match I had with Ricky Steamboat in the sense that all of that match is made up on the fly. Like we had maybe 5 minutes to talk about the match. And I think we had the ending, and that's it. Never worked with me. I've never worked with him. But I know that Ricky really wanted to give me a great match. Just he knew that it would mean a lot to me to at least have a good match with him. And I remember he said to him that night, "We'll give him tonight. We'll give him the match that we would have given him at WrestleMania." He said that to me before we walked out, and was like, "Yeah, we will. Let's go out there and do this for us and have a great match." And that's the beauty of wrestling someone like Ricky. That matchup on the fly, out of nowhere. There is no real script in that match. So in contrast to the match with Steve Austin, there's a lot of script. Like I mapped out every little tiny detail.
All right.
And that's just two different eras. Both beautiful matches.
Bret, I think this is a tough match. Our upcoming match is Bret Hart versus Diesel from Survivor Series 1995, going against Bret Hart versus Roddy Piper from WrestleMania. I have a question in mind. In these matches, they have great finishes. Like you always came up with the great finishes and a variety of style of finishes. What is your philosophy when it comes to finishes in matches? How did you come up with all these kind of different finishes? Were they like through watching a lot of wrestling or just coming up with your such unique finishes?
I think what it really comes down to is you put yourself in the front row. Like whenever I had to think about a match, I'd start thinking about it. It's like if I was a little kid, like 7 or 8, because I used to sit in my dad's wrestling shows and I'd sit in the front row and wait. It's like, okay, I want to see this match. And then I remember thinking, oh, well, what would I do if I was going to control the two wrestlers? If I was going to play with my two action figures, what kind of match would I do? And, you can actually start to, in your mind, you start to think, this is what I would do. And you start to build this idea in your head. And then you go, what would be a good ending? And then what would be a good, there's certain pivotal spots in a wrestling match. Like one of the most important parts of the match is the cutoff spot where the bad guy takes over on the good guy. It just needs to be something devastating, but it doesn't, you always think somebody doing a drop down and then he comes off the ropes and you catch him with a big knee in the gut and he flips over and then rolls around the ring. Always looks good. Always like when you watch somebody give a good run knee in the gut and the guy rolls over selling it, you always go, that hurt. And it sets the pace for the guy to do a sell where he can start selling and the heel starts to tell his part of the story.
A pivotal moment. Yeah.
The next pivotal spot that you really got to have mapped out, and you're in big trouble if you don't, is the spot where the bad guy is on the second rope and he body slams you and he climbs up and he jumps off with a big elbow or something and then you move out of the way. Something like that. Anything where it's just it's the same thing back. Where all of a sudden the baby face gets up and it's like, I want to. So it's there's those kind of things. And then the ending. And the beauty of the match I had with Roddy, I knew we were wrestling each other and I started to think in my mind, like, this is what I think we should do. And I started to think about the pace and I figured it would go like maybe 20 minutes is what we need. And you figure out little spots that you can put in because I never wrestled Roddy before either. And,
that's so.
Roddy worked with me. So it's, and I had a lot of respect for Roddy, but I also go, I want to get my ideas in too. I hope it's not Roddy. Then you fear that maybe Roddy's going to be like Ric Flair or some of these guys that they only see it their way. And then you got to pay respect to them by going, okay, we'll do it your way. But so with Roddy, I met Roddy, and I think I wrote about it in my book, but we met maybe 2 or 3 weeks before the match because he wasn't on the road all the time. But we ended up in Halifax, or I think it was Moncton, New Brunswick. And we had lunch together, and we were eating together, and he said, I got the whole match in my head. He goes, you want to hear it? And I remember thinking, like, I guess I want to hear it, but I'm scared that I'm going to go, I don't like it. And so I'm like, okay, let's hear it. And I'm kind of almost afraid of what he's going to tell me. But I can say this about Roddy. He had exactly the same idea that I did. He sat there with me. This is what I think. And he started to tell me the whole match that he envisioned. And I was like, that's everything I was going to tell you. The same, without the details of what the moves would be. It's just the pace match. The finish in that match was Roddy's finish. Roddy came up with it, and it was an idea he had. He must have seen somebody do it somewhere. Probably the same with the Bulldog match I had in Wembley, where I saw that finish. You'd be surprised at how many times the match I had with Davey, the SummerSlam, the finish where Davey pulls my legs and falls down.
Nice.
I tried so many years to get somebody to do it like I always offered, I threw it out to Tito Santana and Rick Martel one time. I threw it out to the Killer Bees. I remember Killer Bees going, I don't want to do it. Like, it's not very, they didn't think it was a very good idea. And I'm going, you don't get it. It's a great, he collapses down on me. I got nowhere I can go. It's a beautiful finish.
And Brett, that roll up, the sunset flip reversal, was that a Leo Burke? Was he the first guy that you had seen?
Yeah, I did it with Leo Burke in Calgary or Regina. I did it with him a bunch of times.
Yeah, but, gotcha.
Going back to the Piper match, Roddy had seen that somewhere or done it once in his career, maybe when he was younger, when he was a babyface. And he kept it in his back pocket kind of thing and I remember he goes, this is what I saw it done one time. And I think he told me who he did it with and what a great match it was. And it was the perfect, he goes, that's how I want to do it. And so Roddy gets full credit for that match. Now, going back to Kevin Nash, I love the match that I had with Kevin Nash at Survivor Series. It was, I think for sure, it was Kevin Nash's greatest match, for sure. And he's told me that himself, that it was.
Mm-hmm. He always says, yeah.
That's another match that I paint by numbers. I put the whole match together for Kevin. In fact, Kevin hated the finish. He didn't like it at all.
It protects Kevin because the small package, at least it came from nowhere, and it's like it protects him in a way.
That's what I said to him. I said, this finish gives you an out. Like, you actually had me deep, but you're still a baby face, and you have that moment of where you hesitate, where he's picking me up, he's picking me up, and I small package him. Like I'm almost like I'm playing possum a little bit.
Yeah,
which was hard to play possum, but I love the match. There's certain things in that match that were very real. Same thing. It's like that spot where we had that cable from the tied around the post.
Right, wrap it. Yeah.
It was another one of those things that was just an idea to try to make the match different.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the cable was a little too tight. We didn't have a lot of leeway with that. And we ended up having to tie. That was such a tight when I tied up Kevin's, it was such a tight knot. I don't know how we got it undone. I remember going, oh my God, he's gonna never get this thing off.
Right.
Because I could see it when I stuck it in. It was a really cinched knot. And I know when I had to stay down for a considerable length of time, so like you give Kevin time to undo that knot. But another situation where you come up with an idea and doesn't necessarily pay off very good. It's not the best idea. It didn't work, but at least you tried it, and you tried it, and it didn't work great, but it didn't work bad, and at least it looked real. And so I love that match for little bits of realism. I know that, I always make the boast that I never hurt anybody in my career. I certainly took out a few Spanish announcers. I blew up
the table.
I blew out one of those guys' knee, like big time.
Yeah, I remember that.
Oh, seriously?
They took him to the hospital, and he was out for 3 or 4 months or 6 months. I always feel bad about it because nobody told them that I was crashing through the table. And that table, just so you know, I remember saying that might be too thick a table to go crashing through. So they sawed the table in half, and then they took a piece of plywood and reinforced it underneath. But that table was like cement. Like it was not. I don't know how it broke.
Like the tables now or whatever,
Yeah, and it's nothing like those tables. This table was so thick. When they reinforced it underneath, they thought it would just collapse, but it's like, no, that thing was like reinforced. Andre the Giant could have sat on that table.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was that's a really good one to say which one I like better. They're very close. Your pick? I have to pick the Piper one just because it's a little more iconic.
Wow. Right.
It's just a little more iconic, and the match with Kevin was a beautiful match and a great story, and I love, and I know Kevin did, and we've always talked about that. And Roddy said the same thing. Roddy goes, the match I watched back, the best match of my career was the one at WrestleMania with you. He goes, I love it. It's like perfect all the way through. And the match with Kevin said the same thing to me over the years, that was his favorite match of his career. I love both of them, but I'll give the Roddy one just a hair.
One thing that I thought was really good with the Roddy match and the Steve Austin one was that, the color that happened, it was needed and it wasn't like a waste, you know what I mean? And it was unique at the time. So.
Well, the funny thing about the color with Roddy.
Did you get fined for that at the time? Because
there was a funny story about that because we had the match. We were very secretive about it. In fact,
Yeah.
Roddy and me almost had like a mock fake fight when we came back to the dressing room. I came back and go, what the hell are you doing? And what, you know, and he's like, I was an accident, and we had this whole, and I slammed the door.
Yeah.
Because you get fined for
Yeah.
doing
Oh,
that.
yeah, yeah.
So I had to make it look like it was an accident, and we did a good job. And Vince never said anything. And then Ric Flair and I think it was Macho Man, went out next right after us.
Right.
Yeah.
And Rick was doing one of these ones where he's like, you know, blading himself, and they got fined like $5,000, I think.
Wow.
When they came back, and I remember that Vince called me up the next day. He called me into his office and said, was that an accident or was it on purpose? And I said, Roddy kicked me with the toe of his boot in the face, and I made out it was legit.
Yeah.
You know, same with the match I had with Davey at the In Your House. That was very well done too. The fact that I had commissioned doctors checking me in the back, and they gave me stitches. They put stitches in my head, like not very many, like 3 stitches, I think, the next day right here. And they were convinced it was totally on the level.
Wow.
Yeah, that was sick. Another tough match, Bret. I think we have Bret Hart versus The Undertaker, the one night only match. I really love this match. Going against Bret Hart versus 1-2-3 Kid, another legendary match. So I think it's a tough choice.
The Birmingham match was a beautiful match. But the only reason it was a beautiful match is because the only people that cared about that match were me and Undertaker. We went to the building. That's when Shawn and Triple H, they were really screwing us over. They had Owen and Davey playing stupid parts all the way through the show. I'm not sure if Davey had worked yet, but his match, they had Shawn and the Clique sort of messing with him all the way through the match. And I go, what are me and Owen doing? Me and Owen's like, nobody. I said, we would be watching Davey's back. You know, like, why are we letting Clique? And, you know, the screw was in. I don't know, Vince was in on that too. Like, something was amiss. And I know going into that match that Davey had been told, and I had been told, that Davey was going over Shawn.
Yeah.
That he was winning the match. And then so Davey, knowing that, cut promos saying that he dedicated the match to his sister who was dying of cancer. And then they changed it the day they got there. And I thought that did a lot. That demoralized Davey a little bit. Felt like Davey got swerved, and he knew that in wrestling, it's never good to promise something and then not deliver, especially something as serious as it was for Davey with his sister. And we felt like we were being trifled with, like overly trifled, and it was like intentional. And that's where when I think of the screw job, it was all being set in motion to tear me down, to tear all of us down. And I think a lot of that was Shawn and Hunter, who were supposedly doing the booking. I remember, like, when we found out it was me and Undertaker in England, in Birmingham, and we just wrestled at SummerSlam.
Yeah.
We were thinking, like, it's a little soon. Like, we just had our big match a few weeks ago. So it's like, so what are we going to do? And we, you know, he was thinking about it and I was thinking about it, but we hadn't really thought about it till we got to the building that day. But when I landed in Birmingham, or in England, and we drove to Birmingham, on the sides of the bus, on the ring trucks, they had all the, like, the pay-per-view or In Your House or whatever it was. We have all the matches, but the only match they don't have advertised on the poster is me and Undertaker.
I remember
getting to the building and I going, are we even wrestling? And it's like, I thought we were main event. And it's like, I remember I saw Vince. I go, why are we not on the poster? And then for that, Undertaker was for sure maybe the biggest name in England, in UK. He was really over. The crowds always had purple. They had all the people dressed up like him. And it was a huge thing for him and I to finally wrestle. And I think that I was at the height of my glory and with my fans in England. I was really over in England. They love me in England. They love my style. They still do. And I said, this is a really big match. Bret Hart versus Undertaker is huge.
And for the world title as well.
And I go, it's never been seen here. It's going to be big. And we get to the dressing room. I'm not on the posters. And Undertaker's mad too. He goes, what the hell's going on? And I'm going, I don't know what the hell's going on either. And we were so mad, almost to the point that it's like, we shouldn't even try. Like, we should just cut the power on our match. You know, we've ended up saying, let's do these. We're going to have this great match for the fans that we know are waiting out there for this match. Whether they've advertised it or not, all the bullshit, we're going to do it for the fans, and we're going to do it for us because we know how important it is. And that's why I love that match in Birmingham. And we really did deliver a great match. I wish it could have been a little less muddled at the end, you know, with all the run-ins and all the crap. But I mean, again, we were stuck with what they gave us. But the match going, the next other match, the 1, 2, 3 kid match, I think I will move it into the next category. I would give it the win over the Undertaker match, just because it was. I always tell people, especially young kids, young 7, 8-year-old wrestling fan kids that really love wrestling, and their dads get them into wrestling. That 1, 2, 3 kid match is a educational match. You want to watch that match because it's such a beautiful it's a beautiful wrestling story of a young pup sort of getting his shot at the title. He never gets a title shot, but he's got one shot, one night, and he just about pulls it off. And it's a beautiful little story where, you know, he gives everything he's got, and he gives me he potatoed me quite a few times in that match. Busted my lips open. He was so nervous. I think he was trying so hard. It was a very physical match for me. But I mean, if you watch me giving 1, 2, 3 kid those elbow smashes, those uppercut elbow smashes that you know, English wrestlers are famous for, there's some beautiful stuff in that match, and the finish wasn't too complicated. It was kind of a simple finish, but it was, you know, we really took the fans on a nice 15-minute ride. I don't think anybody thought anything special about that match. When he walked out, it was almost like this should be over in about 5 minutes, and instead it was like, no, we're going to make everyone really, they're going to love this match because it's going to be way deeper, way greater than what they expect. And I love that match just for educational reasons, that if a fan you want to learn wrestling psychology, that's how you have a match that stands out. Like, and I know people that still, and same with that match, 1, 2, 3 kid always says it was his greatest match of his career.
Right.
And I think, you know, it was very, like I said, it was a great match for a father and a son to watch wrestling. And if they can just sit back and watch that and soak it up, it's a great lesson match.
Going on, I think this is an easy pick for you, Bret versus Owen from WrestleMania 10. Harry, was you live at that event as well, or?
No, you know, actually, because Davey was working in England at the time for Max Crabtree, so we were over like on sort of like a vacation, and I think we had come back pretty late after one of the shows, and the WrestleMania had been pre-recorded, and then we watched it at like, pretty late, like 10 o'clock at night, which was late for us. But with the time difference over in the UK, are they ahead or behind? I can't remember.
They are behind.
They're behind, yeah.
Or they are ahead, sorry.
But no, you know what? And when we came back, you know, and during this time, you know, there's no cell phones or internet. So when we watched it, I was totally surprised that, you know, Owen took the first fall, and then how everything had happened. But, you know, I remember watching it. I wasn't expecting that at all.
It is going Bret against Bret Hart versus Jean-Pierre Lafitte from In Your House. And Bret, to start the match with an absolutely insane suicide dive. Do you remember that? You almost lands in your head.
Yeah.
That was unbelievable.
I still feel it every day.
Wow.
I landed right on the cement with my head.
Oh,
but it looked awesome.
It wasn't in the right spot. You know, you got to be, because you dive out pretty far, so the guy's got to be pretty far to break your fall.
Yeah.
And he was too close to the apron, and he wasn't there. Like when I took off, he was in the right spot, and then he walked forward. So when I dive out, I got to dive right over his head. I don't even know if I touched him. But I think he did touch my foot or something enough to tip me. Otherwise, I would have just maybe crashed head first into the cement. But it was very dangerous, and it's one of those things that happens. It reminds me of the Iron Man match I had with Sean, where I did the same
Right.
move. And I remember it was one of those little annoying little details of a match. But if you ever watched the Iron Man match back, I remember I got to wait. I'm on one knee, and I remember it's like I wait for Sean to stand up because I can't run and hit the ropes and dive out on him if he's on the ground. If he's not standing up, he's got to stand up to break my fall. You see that Sean gets really petulant and he gets really mad, kind of like, what are you waiting for? Like, he did one of those things where he breaks character and almost makes out like I screwed up the spot. And I'm like, what are you waiting for? You're taking too long. And it's like, you got to stand up, you idiot. Like, I can't do the spot till you stand up. And so I take off, and then he does stand. Eventually, he stands up, and I take off. The moral of that is that when I wrestled Pierre Lafitte, he moved forward, and it just shows you how dangerous that spot can be because I go sailing out right over his head, and there's nobody there, and that's how you get hurt. I could have got killed doing that move. And so, there's a reason why sometimes things are the way they are. But the Pierre Lafitte match was a really good match. It was a really solid match.
Yeah, how was he to work with, Bret?
He was a real pro. He was really. He was trying his hardest too. He had a lot of complications.
I noticed, for a big guy, he was a pretty good bumper.
And he was safe. He was strong.
Yeah.
He picked you up and did stuff. He was always in control. He was a very good wrestler, and he'd had a lot of heat with Sean and Kevin Nash. Him and Nash had a lot of conflict with each other. And so they stuck him with me. I think really that match was another situation where he said, look, I just want to have a really good match to show them that I'm better than they think I am. Mm-hmm. And so that's that match was for him. Like he wanted to he worked his ass off. He worked really hard, and he wanted to prove to everybody that he could deliver a great match. And he did. And it was a great match. And I think it's one of those matches that's like Hakushi. It gets underrated. People forget about it. Right. We had a stupid storyline about my ring jacket being stolen, which was like, just go get another one.
I remember that. Yeah.
It was pretty stupid storyline, but we delivered the match. And that's what at the end I go, that's what I'm all about is the match. I'm not about the promos. I'm not about this. He stole my underwear or whatever it is. Like, who cares? We're gonna have. Yeah. What was the other one?
It's the Owen WrestleMania match, of course.
Yeah, I got to put that one as the one. I'd got to pick that one just because, the match I had with Owen, we had never wrestled each other other than little bits and pieces. We had a couple of situations. And I think we just prior to WrestleMania 10, we had a couple of tag matches with me and 2-3 Kid against Razor. It might have been Razor Ramon tagged up with me against Owen and 1-2-3 Kid. I can't remember, but one of them, and things had switched around. But we were basically in a tag match together. So we got to get familiar with a few moves and things that Owen did where he climbs up the ropes and does his cartwheels and flips and stuff. And we had some pretty good matches, but I noticed that when we were wrestling that Owen wasn't getting reactions. He was getting babyface reactions. And so in my head, I kept thinking, like, I remember telling Owen, give me your best moves, like 10 of them, 10 or 15 of your best moves that you want to put in. And he wrote them all out for me, and I said, okay, I'll figure out the best places to stick them. Right. And I kind of built this whole match in my head. I had the whole match set. And then I kept thinking about it. And then as the match got closer, about 4 or 5 days before WrestleMania, and I started to realize, like, what about the Garden if they start to take Owen as a babyface? They start to really he does these, he climbs up the ropes and does that bounce off the ropes and does the, after a while, Owen starts looking pretty good. Like he starts going, I like this guy. Why are we booing this guy? He's the younger brother, but he's out wrestling his brother.
Yeah, babyface reaction, right?
Owen was making a turn that once you make that turn, you can't, there's no going back. He's going to have to be a bad guy for a couple, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years, or maybe forever. So it's like, we got to do this right. And Owen has to be the bad guy. When this match is over, they have to hate Owen, not love him. If we don't make Owen does it where they love him, we've screwed up. We did it wrong. We did the wrong match. I remember I had the whole match locked out with Owen, and we kind of went through it and it was all set. And it was the night before we went to WrestleMania. I think we had left on a Saturday, maybe on a Friday, but I remember it was the night before we left. And I called Owen and almost in a panic. And I said, I need you to meet in my dad's house in 20 minutes. I got to do the whole match over. We got to come up with a whole different match. And he goes, why? He goes, it's going to be great. I go, it'll be great, but it's going to stink. And so he went up to my dad's house and we completely sat. And I said, you got to be more vicious. You got to bite my fingers. You got to rake my eyes. You got to give me ball shots. You got to.
Yeah, I remember he did that one from the go behind. I think he gave you a nut shot.
Everything from trying to break my fingers and everything. I said, you got to be a little jerk all the way through this match. And otherwise it's going to backfire. They're going to be booing, cheering you. That's the wrong recipe for what we're doing. And so I love that match for the fact that we rewrote the whole match in our heads anyway, before we went. And then when we had the match, it was a great match, but I do think the ones we had a few weeks later on were better. But still, I would say that that was definitely a better match.
Time. We'll just finish the tournament within 10 minutes with the quick pickups for your matches. Just going quickly, Bret Hart versus Davey Boy Smith from SummerSlam, going against the Bret Hart versus Mr. Perfect from SummerSlam. Which match is your pick?
I'll pick the Wembley.
Okay, Bret versus Steve Austin from WrestleMania, going against Bret versus Roddy Piper.
I'll go with Steve Austin.
The Austin match, great. 1, 2, 3 cage match against the Owen Hart WrestleMania match.
I'll go with Owen WrestleMania.
Yeah. Canadian Stampede, the 10-man tag match against Bret versus Shawn from WrestleMania.
Again, they're two great matches. Very different. One has a lot of complexity with so many different characters.
Right.
But I got to go with the other one.
The Shawn match?
The Shawn match. Of all my matches in my career, that was the most challenging match I ever had. It was very hard because I had the deck stacked against me for that match. Vince, I think, was sort of subtly, without me sort of being aware of it, was doing everything he could do to tear me down. It was all about Shawn. He had tried to sort of wash over Bret Hart with, first he did it with Hogan. Hogan didn't work, and then he did it with Kevin Nash. Kevin Nash didn't work. He did it with Lex Luger with the USA thing.
Right.
That didn't work. And then it was like with Shawn, it was like, this time it has to work, damn it. Like, I have to make sure that when this is over, the fans have a new icon, a new star. It's Shawn Michaels, not Bret Hart.
And Bret, at that time, Vince had you on a pretty hectic schedule too, right? Because I think Shawn had taken a couple months off before that.
Shawn took 2 months off and was doing cardio with some football team where he's running the stadium steps, and he was just gearing up, getting his cardio and body ready to just run circles around me. He was going to do the Roadrunner. I was the coyote getting anvils dropped on me and dropped off cliffs and stuff. I went to India. I wrestled over there and got really sick. I remember coming home.
What a treat.
I was really sick, and I had a fever, and I was food poisoning, and I lost weight. And I remember sitting in my toilet throwing up in the sink and thinking, oh my God, I got to wrestle Shawn for an hour in 3 weeks from now. The guys I was working with were Kevin Nash, Undertaker, and Yokozuna. Were the three guys that I was wrestling with in India and on all the tours in Europe and stuff. Yeah. Choke slams, power bombs.
Yeah, big bumps.
Yeah. Body slams from Yoko. When a guy like Yoko, 600 pounds, body slams you, he's splatting you on the mat. It's like, it's like throwing a rotten tomato on the ground. It's like he just, I'm getting no cardio wrestling those guys.
Yeah.
I'm just taking a good beating every night, and I'm coming back to the dressing room going, it's like I feel like I got run over by a car every night. And it was just, I remember going, I can't get my cardio up with these guys because you got to work a slower pace. And it was designed that way because they didn't want me having good cardio. They didn't want me to get ready for the match with Shawn.
Yeah.
So I came home, and when I got that sick from India trip, I remember I completely, once I got feeling better, which for a few days, but I remember going, I got to train for this match the way Sean's training. And so I started doing my own cardio aside from my wrestling schedule. And a lot of times we had double shots. And I was doing triple threat matches at that time. I think it was me, Stone Cold, and Triple H. We were all doing these triple threat matches for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
But I just made myself like consciously work harder and just started getting my cardio up. And I remember like making the matches longer and doing more work in the match and just,
picking up the pace.
Making myself get my cardio up. And then between that and then I had a training schedule that I did on bikes and stuff where I was doing stationary training. I would do.
Yeah. I remember you were telling me you would do a minute hard and then a minute like a rest recovery, right?
Stationary bike for a full hour, and I would go 1 minute on, 1 minute off. And sometimes I'd go 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, and then 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. And I would just pedal light for 30 seconds, and then I'd go full blast. Really got my cardio up along with the and I just got more prepared for that match. And I think that's what that match was designed to be. It was designed to be a match where you're going, the Roadrunner's just way faster than this Wile E. Coyote guy. It's just not. It was supposed to be a blow-off. Sean was supposed to run circles around me. It never happened. And so I held my own, and I made people. When that match was over, they remembered. It was Sean's moment.
Mm-hmm.
It was over that they remembered me just as well. And that would in a lot of ways is what I love about that match is that I take most of the credit for that match too. That's my match, that whole match with Sean, the Iron Man match. Sean's contribution to that, a couple of arm bars and where he worked my arm or something like that.
And Brett, wasn't it your idea that it was just the one fall? Because wasn't it Vince wanted it to be like 2 to 3 or something like that, and it was your idea to switch it to go into overtime with the one fall?
No, in fact, it was the other way around. They came to me. Pat Patterson came to me and said, it was Pat's idea to do one fall.
That's who. Okay.
I remember going, geez, one fall. It's going to be a pretty boring hour. That's an hour with no pinfalls. It's going to make the match even harder. I had done Iron Man matches before with Ric Flair and Owen. Where
I saw those.
Mm-hmm. We did 3 falls to 2. Me winning the last fall in the last minute of the match. But I thought that was way more suspenseful. Right. But at the same time, it's like, okay, one fall. I hope it works. I'll tell you what I think that was the saving grace of the match that saved us was that spot. This is another spot that Pat Patterson came up with. The one where we took out Tony Chima with the kick.
Oh, yeah.
Where he was sitting on the chair and I fell and leaned against the chair.
Yeah,
and I moved out of the way. That, like, when you do these matches, an hour match, they get very slow. And the first 10 minutes you can get, you like I told Sean, we'll wrestle and you end up working my arm. Then I'll work your a headlock. And but it gets to be 20, 25 minutes. People start going, oh, this is boring. Like it's, how much of this is left? Like, 35 more minutes of headlocks and arm bars. And I always thought, the hardest part in an hour match is the 20-minute to 30-minute part of the match. That's where you either win or you lose. That's where sometimes you lose your audience, where they go, oh, I can't sit through this. It's too long. Plus the wrestlers start tired. But the little spot with Tony Chimo, that Pat suggested, threw just enough of a monkey wrench into the storyline where people didn't know what was going to happen. They took him out on a stretcher, and then we get back in the ring in the match. Suddenly it's 30 minutes, 35 minutes gone to the match. And now it's downhill from there. Like we got over the hardest part with a little bit of something different. But the timing, if you watch that match, and the timing that I move out of the way and the kick comes and he kicks Tony Chimo, it's such beautiful timing. And I give Sean credit. Sean was a great wrestler. And the timing was so perfect. And that spot and Tony Chimo, the way he sold it and the way the whole thing, that got us over the hump of the hardest part of the match. And I know that of all the matches I ever had, that was the one I felt the most. Wembley would have been the other one where I felt like I might as well jumped out of an airplane without a parachute. It was the two matches where I really came home like just sore for a couple of weeks or months after that.
Speaking of the Wembley, Brett, the semifinals, the Wembley match going against the Steve Austin WrestleMania 13 match. What is your pick? Tough match.
I would have to say, I think I like the Steve Austin match the best, but it's very close.
Yeah, definitely.
It's really a question of what you're mood for. I love the match with Steve. I think mostly for the, I always say with Steve, like, when I walked out to the match, I was the baby face. The crowd loved me.
Right.
And I didn't do anything except for wrestle like Bret Hart. Like I didn't change styles or anything. I just was very rugged baby face. But I know when I walked back to the dressing room, if I got little kids giving me the finger and they're flipping me off, and there's people calling me that I'm a crybaby, and it's like, and 20 minutes, everything changed.
Yeah, one thing that I think is similar with the match with Austin and the match with Davey too, is that after both of those matches, I think Davey and Steve were both kind of brought up to another level, like a superstar. Like if they were, I think that the color and everything really made Steve in that match. Like I think that kind of brought him to another level. I think with Davey too.
Yeah, I think again, it's sort of a preference of you. Like if you're really in the mood for a good babyface battle, the Wembley match is the better one. But if you're in the mood for a good kind of mind blow of like, everyone hated Steve Austin when he walked up, and exactly. But we got 25-30 minutes of Steve being Steve and Bret Hart being Bret Hart, and by the end of it, they don't like me anymore. Like they're mad at me, and they love Steve. And it's like, how do you do that? In a lot of ways, it was a very beautiful sort of mesh of the story.
Right. The other semi-final match, it's Bret versus Owen Hart from WrestleMania 10 going against Bret versus Shawn Michaels from WrestleMania 12.
I would pick the Shawn match.
Wow.
Again, very close.
Right.
But I only say this is that I don't know that me and Shawn could have done any better. That was about as good a match as we could have ever hoped to have. It was perfect, like flawless. But the match with Owen, as you said, let's put one of the matches you had with Owen 6 weeks later that you had in Birmingham or in London or in Berlin or some of those cities against the Iron Man match. It might be a different story, but that match at WrestleMania 10 was our first one. There was still a lot of little mistakes that I won't go into a long detail about little things that weren't quite perfect. But there was a lot of, in my mind, there's little things that were not quite perfect and could have been better. But it was really great considering it was our first dance. You never have a perfect dance the first time. And the Iron Man match with Shawn, we wrestled for years, so we had this impeccable sort of timing and understanding of each other's
chemistry.
And we just had that much of a little edge over Owen, I think.
The final, it goes to Bret Hart versus Steve Austin from WrestleMania 13 against Bret versus Shawn Michaels from WrestleMania 12. What is the greatest Bret Hart match?
I would say the Steve Austin match was the best. Better by, again, they're very, in a lot of ways, they're a dead tie. I wouldn't, even the Wembley match. I think the Wembley, the Iron Man, and the Stone Cold match, they're all my three greatest matches, and it's hard to, it's like picking your favorite kid or something. It's like, but the match with Steve, in contrast to the match with Shawn, the match with Steve was somebody that totally trusted me and listened to me and was like, okay, I'm going to do everything you tell me to do. And that's what, it was like about a guy that trusted me. And like when I say he trusted me to do everything I told him to do. Like, this is what we're going to do. And it's like, okay, he was totally, the Iron Man match with Shawn, like I say, I think the way they tried to set me up going into it, there was a lot of situations where Shawn kind of leaned on me a lot in the match, where he went up heavy on body slams. Like, he didn't help me. It was like Shawn was trying to tire me out and run me out of gas, and sort of doing it very subtle. Like when he covered me for, he'd put all his weight on me and I'd kick out. And, you know, just things where I go, like I picked him up for a body slam. He didn't really help me so much. It was always like, it's like picking up Andre or something. I got to slam him. He was to tire me out. He was working to tire me out and trying to tell a story where he was, you know, going to run circles around me, but it never really happened. I think the Iron Man match was a match of two guys trying to outshine each other for 60 minutes. Yep. Not necessarily working together as a one with one idea, and both guys are trying to achieve that. Whereas the match with Steve was two guys working to make each other. Right. Steve's trying his hardest to make me. I'm trying my hardest to make Steve. We're really working for an ultimate goal together. Whereas Sean might have had his own slightly bit of his own plan, and I delivered a higher end performance than he expected.
Bret, my last question is, I come from Bahrain, and the people of Bahrain, when they knew that I'm going to interview Bret Hart, they had a fond memory of you coming to the country. Any special memories or any special message to my people?
Just that I remember being there, and I remember having such a great trip. I remember it's one of my last great memories I can think of with Davey and Owen. We went on a fishing trip or a boat ride, and I remember Davey caught a little shark. It was probably about that long.
Oh yeah, shark. I remember seeing pictures of that. Yeah.
It was a vicious, that little shark didn't want to die. They fought. Right. They had it in a little container. I remember Davey let it go in the end. He put it back in the water. He felt sorry for it. He said, I don't feel right. And we threw it back in the water. But it was just a great little day. I remember Owen was on the boat and they had jet skis, and it was a beautiful memory. I remember, we all had such a nice time there, and it was a beautiful, of all the Middle East countries I ever went to, Bahrain, I think, was the nicest. And I wish someday I could get a chance to go back, and maybe someday, somehow.
It will be our great pleasure.
Do they have Comic Cons in Bahrain?
Right. Actually, we do have from time to time, and hopefully after this pandemic is over, still you have a big fan base in Bahrain. And they would love to have you back.
I hope so. I remember, I think it was Bahrain where they tore down a McDonald's or it was a Burger King or something like that. We had an autograph signing there. Right. They broke all the glass. They were so excited. There was nobody was mad or anything. There was just so many people, and they were pressing in against the glass that they broke all the glass, and it was just sort of a mass confusion. And I remember right away they got us all on the buses and got us out of there because it was they couldn't control the fans. They were so happy to see us. It was and way too many fans showed up for this signing.
Yeah. Anything you want to blog, Bret? Because before coming to the interview, I think you have a new series in your BretHart.com. Do you want to blog that as well?
Yeah, well, it's a new thing that's just started. I think it's going to start in the next week or so. I just hope it's good. I've just sat down with a guy that I know that's done these interviews with me for a few months now, and his name's Mike Lonsborough. He's a local sports guy here, but we've tried. A lot of times I feel like I've said so much, like even in this show today, I've talked about so many things. It's like, I don't know, if you listen to these things back, you go, geez, I've heard, I'm sick of listening to them. I hope they're worthwhile and that people enjoy them. And I welcome all my fans to at least give it a try and see if there's some good stories that I can bring out, some good memories.
Harry, thank you very much for joining me as well in this interview. It's been a great pleasure having you, like always.
Oh, you're welcome, Hassan. It's been my pleasure, and it was a real treat to do this with Bret. It's too bad DJ wasn't able to join, but it was really good, though.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Okay, thank you, Hassan. Thanks, Bret.